Sugidama blog. Sugidama blog.
Hey everyone, welcome to the episode number 10. Oh, already 10 of Sugidama Podcast, the podcast about Japanese sake, the drink which is such a pleasure to serve to anyone. My name is Alex, in case you are new to the podcast, and I'm going to play another great interview today with Erika from Moto London. Looks like my interviews are getting longer. Probably it's a sign of my interviewing skills getting better. At least it's what I hope for, but it's for you to judge. So this episode clocks just over an hour, and I was trying to shorten it, but Erika's story is so engaging that I couldn't sacrifice anything but only a few bits. If you find this episode too long, please send me an email. Send me an email in any case and let me know what you think. It's alex@sugidama.co.uk. Before I properly introduce Erika, let me tell you about our sponsor, London Sake, a very cool online sake shop. They have an amazing choice of more than 100 sake from 25 breweries, which they deliver across the UK and Europe. Their website has very handy tasting notes and food pairing suggestions, so it's quite easy to make a choice and get your perfect sake. Also, they have curated sake tasting sets, picking different types of sake from various categories, regions and breweries, which give you a great opportunity to try and decide what type of sake you prefer. Quite similar to sake flights Erika will talk about in the interview. And you can get a 10% discount if you use the magic word Sugidama, all caps, during checkout. London Sake, making sake simple. Again, don't forget, if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts, I will read it out. Reviews drive the popularity of podcasts. So, if you would like to support me, please do it. If you can't find how to do it, there is an instruction from one of my kind listeners. Go to the Sugidama Podcast main page in Apple Podcasts and scroll down. The reviews should be there. So now, let me introduce Erika, who is an amazing person and whom I have known for some time through my blog, Instagram, and personally. She is a sake and wine specialist and director of Moto London, a sake bar which opened in London Covent Garden just about a year ago. The story of Moto is really fascinating. You can imagine what it means to open a bar, and not just a bar, but a sake bar, 3 months before the UK went into a complete lockdown for more than 2 months, and then again in November. But let's listen to her story.
Sugidama blog.
Hello Erika, how are you?
I'm very good, Alex. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm alright. Yeah, very nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
On this nice Moto background. It's a lot of
Yes.
sake bottles.
Exactly. I was actually Zooming someone the other day and they thought this was my own personal collection.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I have the sake wall at Moto behind me just as a photo. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the first thing you see when you enter Moto. So
Yeah, I'm looking forward to enter Moto actually.
yes, this Wednesday, December 2nd, finally. It's about time. And hopefully we don't need to go into another lockdown anytime soon. So hopefully we're open for good this time around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hope. Fingers crossed.
Yes, all my fingers are crossed.
Okay, thanks a lot for agreeing to do the interview. It's
Happy to be here.
very exciting.
Very
so let's start. Probably if you can introduce yourself.
Okay,
and
great.
Tell us why sake.
Okay, so I'm Erika. Hello, everyone. I'm the director and co-owner of Moto. Moto is the UK's first independent Japanese sake bar, shop, and eatery. We're in the heart of Covent Garden. And today happens to be our 1-year anniversary. So it's very cool that Alex asked me to record this interview on such a monumental day for us at Moto. Exactly a year ago today, we opened our doors. And sure, we've been closed twice with lockdowns and all, but we made it. Um, and there's lots to celebrate. So it's a very cool day for us to be recording. As for me personally, I guess you mentioned why sake.
Yeah.
This question is always so difficult for me to answer because there isn't that one sake that, I had a sip of and changed my life forever. I don't really have that aha moment, but the fact that sake is now my passion, my career, my identity, it just makes sense given just the course of my whole life, really. But I'm not going to get into the whole story, but I guess the biggest reason is that when I was growing up in Japan, so I'm half Japanese, half Canadian, and I was born and raised in Japan, and I lived in Japan until I was 18. But my whole upbringing in Japan, I had this whole, the grass is greener on the other side mentality. I very much, because I went to an international school, I had English speaking friends. I just wanted to wear Western clothes, eat Western food. I just wanted to go abroad. And, I just wasn't appreciating Japan for all its wonderful aspects, really. And it was when I left Japan that I started, falling back in love with everything that Japan has to offer. And sake, when I came across sake, it really was the key, really, to opening up, just especially because sake breweries are in small, sleepy countryside towns. That's where true, authentic Japanese culture and history still remains. And through sake, I was exploring, different like dishes, different historical traditions. Because I was growing up in Tokyo most of the time, Tokyo, while being an insanely cool metropolitan city, it doesn't really reflect all of Japan. But again, through sake, I was really getting to know, all the glorious aspects about Japan. And yeah, that's probably my biggest reason, is it was my key to unlocking my roots, basically, and helping me appreciate Japan all over again. So
yeah, sounds very cool. But you started your education, alcohol education, with wine, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So my foot in the door in the world of hospitality was through wine. I thought that that's, wine really did fascinate me, and it is going to remain one of my passions for sure. But, I think when you start becoming a connoisseur, if you will, or just very interested in the world of wine or any drinks, you start wanting to dabble into other things. And so I know a lot of wine sommeliers that start getting really into coffee, into tea, into different spirits. And for me, I thought, why not just, just study about sake just a little bit. I'll dabble in it because I'm Japanese. So I took the Wine and Spirits Education Trust, their course on sake. That was really, I just did it casually. I was just like, why not? It's like 3 or 4 days of my life, whatever. And that really did open my eyes to the world of sake, and it led to the things I was mentioning before in terms of how I became so passionate. But I definitely already had a fascination towards craft drinks, fermentation, brewing methods. I love learning. So I already had all these different, everything was there in terms of why I would end up falling in love with sake, but I just started it through wine, and I worked as a wine sommelier. So I think that actually really helps now what I do, because Moto is in London. We're speaking to a Western audience, and especially a lot of British people, and there's a huge wine history and culture here. People understand when you talk in wine language, whereas they might not understand with technical terminology in the sake world. So I love explaining sake to people in a way in which they understand. And thankfully, I have that wine background, so I could explain sake in a wine speak, if you will. And I use a lot of different like tasting notes that people understand. So basically my wine background is really helping me in explaining sake to an audience that understand and are familiar with drinking wine on a day-to-day basis, for sure.
Interesting thing about wine is that obviously the tasting profile of wine and sake, they're so different. Wine is more like very outgoing, usually very deep, and it's a lot of acidity and other stuff. Well, sake is more like subtle. It's got a lot of stuff is going on, but it's underneath, so to speak.
Yeah.
So how did you find this transition from this kind of festival of tastes, for example, to more subtle and
yes, for sure. Definitely the fact that wine has more acidity, that's definitely true. And with wine, you don't have this secret component of umami. Umami is just so distinctive to not just sake, but a lot of different Japanese flavors like soy sauce and miso and all these different things. But I do think that there is enough overlap. For example, a very aromatic and fruity sake has a lot of notes, both in aroma and taste, that a white wine would have, for example. Even especially if you're getting into more like aged sake, that's very similar flavor profile to aged wines. So not that like sake could only be appreciated by having similar flavor profile to wine, but I do think that there is enough of an overlap. And when there isn't, like this thing called umami and kind of that more subtle nature, as you mentioned, I think that is one of the beautiful aspects of sake. So that's just a selling point that I don't even need to try to push, especially with the umami. It's something that is really foreign for a Western audience to have it in the form of drinking like a beverage. Usually umami is found when they're eating steak or cheese, but not when you're drinking an alcoholic beverage. But it just goes so well as a food pairing. It's just a lot more richer and robust. And I think it's just like a mentality shift. Once you get over the fact that it's a bit foreign and you start just enjoying it, I think it's just very natural moving forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because obviously this kind of link between wine and sake is very important, especially for Western audience. When, as you said, you can explain sake in wine terms, which is very understandable for everyone in the West.
Yeah, and at Moto we actually serve our sake in wine glasses. I do think wine glasses are the best vessels in order to appreciate aroma and flavor. And I do always say that sake is brewed like a beer, but appreciated like a wine. So the fact that the same experience as a wine, you want to open amongst loved ones, with food, without food, with wine, if we're speaking of wine, perhaps a crisp pale rosé is great for the summer, but a rich Cabernet is great with your steak in winter. And the same way sake has, a nice crisp Junmai Daiginjo that's great to drink in the summer, and a really robust Junmai that's great to drink with your food in the winter. Exactly the same experience. You just, there's little tweaks. That makes sake so amazing and a great beverage in and of itself. So, but again, no need for it to feel so foreign.
Yeah, it's true. So you were moving from wine to sake, and you were working in the hospitality industry, like as a wine sommelier, and then Moto.
Yeah. So during that period of time that you're mentioning, and sake started becoming an increasingly bigger part of my life. And I had this pipe dream. At that point, I thought it was a pipe dream, but I was telling everyone, I'm going to one day open up a sake bar. That's what I told people. And I had all these, aspirations and these dreams. I was just daydreaming about the sake bar, but I thought that it was going to be like 10 years in the future, Of course, nothing and again, I say pipe dream because it's one of those things, who knows if it'll ever happen, but you just hope it's going to happen. And at that point is when I met someone who happened to have already been putting in the work to make a sake bar in London a reality. So he's the founder of Moto. He had already been putting in the work, but basically it was fate. We met at a time, like-minded people coming together, and Moto was born really as a collective vision. And so we just basically met at the right time, and that's when so many things started to happen. So it really has been a whirlwind of a journey for me personally, who thought this thing was going to maybe happen for me in 10 years, and it happened for me in less than 2. And it was boom, boom, boom. It was just very much, things fell into place. But that's really what I felt with my whole sake journey, is when sake entered my life, it just clicked and things just started happening. So Moto very much is a lot of our passions coming together. It really was a passion project.
It's fascinating when people can basically bring their dreams true. And make things they were dreaming about for some time, which is fascinating. So when you were dreaming about opening sake bar before, and the Moto now, is it any kind of similarity in concept? Did you imagine something like that, or it was more like the other person's vision? You were just decided to adopt and go with?
I definitely think it's so similar to exactly what I envisioned, because for me personally, I was just basically in London, and there's all these really cool wine bars, even spirits, there's a mezcal bar, there's all these different things, yet there is no sake bar. The only time you could drink sake, this is again before Moto, and when I wanted to open up a sake bar, my reasoning was the only way you could drink sake is by going to a fancy Japanese restaurant, where you're having sushi, you're having just kaiseki food or something of that matter. And the people serving sake to you they don't really have a clue as to what they're serving. So the fact that sake is not accessible, first and foremost, unless you're dedicating your evening to a Japanese night. And B, the people serving it to you don't even know what they're serving. How can it lead to an informed decision? How can you have the right sake with the right food pairing? You basically can't appreciate sake for everything that it is. So then you're setting everyone up for failure. I was like, no wonder more people aren't falling in love with sake, because there is no infrastructure to do that. So that is where I really dreamt of a sake bar, in which, in a very cool, fun environment, not at all, you don't need to bring your pen and paper to Moto like it's like a hard crash course. No, nothing of that matter. But in a fun manner, having staff, a team around that, if you have any questions, if you are interested, they'd tell you all about the appropriate food pairing. They tell you about the humans behind the bottle, the people who, pour their hearts and souls into making these amazing works of art. What is rice polishing ratio? What where is the brewery? What happens in the prefecture in which the sake is made? There are people there at hand to, answer all these questions for you. And maybe you'll learn a thing or two. And I do think that that's the beginning of falling in love with something, is when those barriers are broken down. And those barriers are usually set up because of lack of information. So with more knowledge, I think truly does come power. And so, just demystifying these things. Of course, sake may seem inaccessible because it's in a different language. The country's halfway across the world. Unless you've been to Japan, the only things accessible to you are the few bits of information in English. So there really needed to be a place in London that, in a fun, inviting manner, answers your every sake question. And I do think that's truly what Moto has become. In the course of this last year, it's amazing the amount of regular customers we've been able to have. And I do think it's that just that connection that they've had with our staff, our products. Sake takes you to Japan and to the different breweries, and it's different flavor profiles, different food pairing options. There's just so much to explore. So I do think that definitely Moto has realized that vision for sure. And I'm so excited for the next year. I just can't wait to dabble more into everything that we want to achieve with our mission. Yeah.
When you were opening, thinking about Moto, obviously there are two ways to do it in terms of concept. You could have done it like a traditional Japanese izakaya type.
Yeah.
This kind of hole in the wall places when you go there, it looks awful, but people are so nice, sake is so great, food is so tasty, like at least small tapas things. Or you could have done, obviously, Tokyo style as a very cool Japanese modern style. So as I understand, it's more like a second one. It's more like a modern bar, like a Tokyo or any other place in the world, when it's a modern bar with a modern concept, but serving this drink. So was it like conscious decision to go this way, or you were tempting to do, let's do something very, very traditional?
So definitely it was a conscious decision. We wanted to, so first and foremost, we wanted to represent authentic Japanese beverage drinking culture. What is that? Basically, it's not really like here where people just go to a pub and have one pint after another. Usually in Japan, if you're drinking, you're eating. So there is definitely going to be a food menu. That's actually why when we first opened our doors, we only started out with a very minimal but homemade otsumami, which is like kind of like a nibbles, like a tapas menu. So that is actually what we started off with, because in Japan, you're usually nibbling along while you're having your different alcoholic beverages. But we ended up expanding our food menu later on to include obento boxes, which have been huge hits. So I'm really happy we launched that. Basically meal boxes that are portable, they're nutritious, they're all gluten-free, just like our sake, but they've been, crowd favorites. So that's been great. But basically at the beginning, going back to kind of our vision, we wanted to represent authentic Japanese beverage drinking culture with a variety of drinks from all across Japan, showcasing the seasonality of the drinks. That's why we already have had a few different imports from Japan, because we import everything ourselves direct from the breweries. So we wanted to showcase seasonality. We wanted to showcase the potential for food pairings. We wanted it to be a very warm environment, because that's something in Japan, especially these hole-in-the-wall places that you're mentioning.
Yeah,
It is usually a bunch of regulars that go and they sit at the bar, they talk to the owner. The owner knows like literally your wife's name, your kid's name, what your boss at work that you hate, so you have these conversations. It's that home away from home. So we definitely wanted to represent those aspects of Japanese beverage drinking culture. But at the same time, we wanted to make it an accessible place. We didn't want to come across as just niche, us just doing our own thing and you better buy into what we're doing. No, we really wanted, again, to put our products and our producers at the forefront. We really just wanted to be the vessel in which more people can have an appreciation for these products and this whole world. And to do that, you can't just be super traditional and not at all accessible. I think accessibility is the key word. So that's why we did try to represent authentic Japanese beverage drinking culture, but with a moto twist, with a Western angle, so that it is an inviting place. And a lot of our customers are just people who are walking by. They see the sake wall, they see our the different lights, and they hear the music, which is not at all like Japanese music. We play lots of contemporary jazz as well as like hip hop and R&B. We have a whole bunch of different things that are very Western as well. And that draws people in, but what we're talking about and drinking and eating are very authentic. So we really just try to get that balance. And so hopefully when you come to Moto, you'll hopefully think that we've achieved that, or at least that's always something that we're evolving and trying to achieve for sure.
Yeah, I think it's very good move in terms of trying to marry traditional Japanese culture with Western presentation, if you like. Because I agree that sometimes people are just afraid to go in if they feel it's something unfamiliar.
Yes, exactly. And I do actually think that that's one of the unfortunate downfalls of why sake is a declining industry, even in Japan. It's that the industry has not been able to evolve with the times. And, that's due to a number of different reasons. But I do think for anything to continue being at the forefront of people's minds, you need to evolve, So if we want sake to be a drink in which more and more people are enjoying in their day-to-day, I think instead of trying to push something so Japanese to a British or Western audience, I think that's setting ourselves up for failure. I think rather than that, we should just sell sake and Japanese craft beverages for what they are, yes, but within a more accessible context than what we mentioned. And only then can people start feeling comfortable enough, I think, to have a glass of sake with us, not on their Japanese night, but, they just casually are going back from work. They drop by, have, some small chat with us, drink a lovely glass of sake alongside their wonderful Japanese craft beer that we also stock, have a few nibbles, and then grab the sake that you liked to go, take it home and have it with your Indian curry or your fish and chips or your roast dinner or whatever it is that you're doing that night, So for it to become more a part of people's day-to-day, we need to do something a bit different. And that's kind of what Moto's trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. And the name Moto means, I know in sake world, Moto means starter. So
yes.
You see yourself as like a starter of like a sake revolution that a lot of people are talking around, like Tom and Lucy and Kampai and
yes, I love
people, that. These kind of oh yeah, let's start sake revolution. There is a podcast sake revolution now, and
yes.
So it's like a movement. So do you see yourself as something that will start a sake revolution in hospitality industry in London.
I
or in the UK.
absolutely love that interpretation. We weren't as creative as you. The reason why we originally thought of the name Moto was two reasons. One, the fermentation starter. Basically, without Moto, there is no sake. So it's just such a crucial part of the sake brewing process. So we wanted to include that. And then moto in Japanese means origin. So again, representing that original Japanese beverage drinking culture from the source. So those are the reasons. But I love your interpretation. Honestly, I think that's what we need to start going with is hopefully moto can be the catalyst or part of the movement at least. Because there's already a sake buzz here. Sure, it's small, but it's taking flight. And I love the timing in which we've opened up Moto. I do think, sure, for the world of hospitality, it was the worst year to open, again, with the lockdowns. But in terms of a sake movement, I think if the lockdown happened 5 years ago, way less people were drinking sake at home, So it is a very exciting time. And so, I do hope that like the fermentation starter, everything, all the movements starting to happen, it's the catalyst for the sake to start brewing. If we could be that catalyst to get more and more people excited about sake, that's like mission accomplished. So thanks Alex for that.
Did you want to open it in very central London, or just happened that, there is a place in Covent Garden, let's use it?
Yeah, we definitely wanted to be in central, and Covent Garden was the ideal spot for us. We really kept on looking at different property near and around Covent Garden. So when we found this spot that was smack in the heart of Covent Garden, literally, 2 streets over from the market, we were like, this is meant to be. It's because we wanted to be smack in the central so that we don't have to be associated with being in a certain neighborhood in which it's either, for example, if we opened in East London, it would have been, it's such a hip niche thing. If we open in West London, it's a very posh thing. London is great in the sense that no matter where you go, it has its own culture and identity, which is amazing. But we did want Moto to speak for itself, not be bundled up into that area, but it's its own thing. And we thought that being really central is the way to do that. Covent Garden, there was a bunch of tourists, usually always from all around the world. There's offices, a few residential people, but British people and tourists alike all congregated at Covent Garden. And that's the environment in which we wanted to showcase sake for what it is, instead of people making assumptions without even entering our doors, basically. We wanted Moto to speak for itself after you come to us.
Yeah, I think it's a great location. It's definitely something that you're in the middle of everything, because a lot of theaters around, Royal Opera House, and a lot of very cool restaurants. Small, and so you would probably fit perfectly.
Yes,
or that's there.
What we hoped for. Yeah, exactly.
Again, to remind you guys about London Sake, our sponsor, and their cool curated sake tasting sets. I'm just looking at their website, and they have a Dasai tasting set of all 3 main Dasai sake, 45, 39 and 23. If you listen to the episode 5 about my sake story, I talked about all 3. So you can buy the tasting set and compare your tasting notes with mine. There are a few other interesting sake tasting sets as well. So have a look, don't forget about the magic word, Sugidama, all caps, to get your 10% discount. So you've been doing business for a year now, 12 months. Obviously, there were ups and downs. I mean, the major down probably was lockdown. No question about that. What did you feel in March when it was quite clearly that we're going in this direction. What did
Yes.
you think? Did you think, oh, we're going to close down, or what was your sort of state of mind that time?
Yes. So with the initial lockdown, I just even remember when Boris Johnson made the announcement that we were going into a lockdown, because Moto and only one other bar on our street and Maiden Lane were open until that very last day we were allowed to be open. We were like the last guys standing, because I really told my team, I was like, no, we're not closing. We're not closing. We were in denial, basically. So when we were forced to close our doors, we had only been open for 3 months. We were just starting to have a buzz. People were, the place was getting packed. We were finally putting into action the things that we had been envisioning. The team was finally starting to come together. So just gaining momentum, basically, and we had to close our doors. So of course there was panic initially. What are we going to do? How are we going to survive? Especially because the uncertainty made it the hardest. There was it's not like this last lockdown where there was a date set in which perhaps lockdown measures could be lifted. The first lockdown was nothing like that. We didn't even know how, life-threatening COVID was, in terms of, health and safety aspect. Everything was up in the air. But after the initial panic wore off, it actually allowed us to very much pivot and adjust to what was going on. And it has led to long-term benefits for us. So our online sake shop, that's something that we weren't thinking of opening until way down the line. We thought that was like a 2021 thing. First we're going to be up and running as a bar. We're going to make our mark, and then we'll start doing things like the online sake shop. But nope, 3 months in, there was no bar. So we opened up our online sake shop. So that's been very, very cool. So we have people from all over the UK ordering our sake, which it's not just now people having to travel to London to have access to our sake. So that's an amazing thing that's happened because of the lockdown. Our takeaway and delivery offering, that's something we didn't do before. And so that's been great. Even our wonderful obento boxes, as I mentioned before, I do think a big motivation for us to create our obento boxes was the lockdown, because obentos are very portable. So in Japan, it's what's been used for centuries. It's kind of like a quick portable option. Like, the mom makes an obento for her children or her husband when they go off to school or work. If you're going camping, you take your obento. So in the same way for takeaway, we thought what a wonderful offering to have. And that's, again, been a huge hit, as I've mentioned. So yeah, we've had a lot of things that actually were born thanks to the lockdown. It made our team stronger. When things are rough, it makes people come together. So that's definitely been a positive. So yeah, basically, I'm not going to say thank God we had, a global pandemic strike 3 months after we opened, but thankfully we managed to chug along and actually start some new initiatives as part of the process. So there's definitely a silver lining for sure.
It's everything got silver lining. We just keep looking.
Exactly. Just keep on looking. You have to look very, very, very you have to look a lot sometimes, but it's there.
Apart from lockdown, what were the biggest ups and downs in these 12 months?
Those lockdown sure was definitely the lows. But I do think, looking back over this past year, there definitely were more highs than lows for sure. I love how we've been able to very much stick to our mission,
Hmm.
so education, like I mentioned before, is going to be at the heart of what we do always. So I loved how we started our Moto Sake school.
Hmm.
I hope to get back into that in the new year when lockdown restrictions, or basically COVID restrictions, ease up a little bit. So it's when we feel more comfortable gathering together. But that was a wonderful way in which people found out more about sake, about the different breweries. We did also like different food
Hmm.
and sake pairings. Um, I love getting really nitty gritty into the
Hmm.
sake knowledge as well. So that was an amazing offering. I also love, taking a step back from just sake and food. I love how our cocktail menu was something that became a huge hit,
Yeah.
because if you're trying to represent authentic Japanese beverage drinking culture, you can't ignore Japan's kind of world renown at this point. Its cocktail scene is really, really cool. People in Japan are all about training for a long period of time, meticulous, just even to the little tiny details. They spend such effort and care. And so making cocktails really fits this kind of Japanese mentality and Japanese expression of art. So thankfully, we have a wonderful head bartender that his creativity is beyond. And so each and every one of our cocktails has an amazing story to tell, and they're presented so beautifully. And I love how that's also brought in new people, like a new crowd to Moto that we maybe wouldn't have had otherwise. Um, so our Moto family really is sure the people who love Japanese culture, but just people who are really interested in craftsmanship, or people who love cocktails and they come to Moto for our one of a kind unique cocktails, or they love food, so they love our different tapas menu and our bento boxes. They want to just learn something new, so they come to a Moto Sake school. So we've been able to tailor to different audiences while still always striving to come back to our mission. So yeah, there's been so many highs this past year, and so I can't wait for what this next year will bring. Hopefully less lockdowns, hopefully less interruptions, but I'm very excited to continue with and even get more into cross-cultural food and sake pairings. That's something that was on our agenda, but we couldn't quite get to. Not just sake with Japanese food, but sake with Italian, with Chinese, with Indian. So hopefully we start doing really cool things in that realm. We have exciting ideas for collaborations. So, again, not just sticking to Japanese partnerships, but with a cool tea brand, with a cool taco place, like all these different kinds of
Yeah.
collaboration. That's something I'm really excited for. Um, so yeah, we have kind of a lot of on our plate um, that we hadn't planned for this past year. Couldn't quite get into it, but as mentioned, other things, unexpected things blossomed. So everything happens for a reason. But there's a lot on the agenda for us. So yeah, very exciting times.
Yeah, yeah, you've got so many plans.
Exactly. So a
Yeah,
lot
you
of the
just
time,
bursting with this
yes, a lot of the times
ideas.
we have to chat about, okay, we thought we were going to launch this now, but no, no, no. We have too many things going on, so we have to save it for next month.
Yeah,
We always have to have these because we're continuously thinking of different ideas, for the bar, for our takeaway offering, for our social media channels, whatever it is, just always good times, education, um, experiences. That's kind of what we're trying to do. So yeah,
yeah,
basically overflowing with ideas, but yeah,
yeah. It's
hopefully
so exciting.
realize
Yeah,
more and more things.
yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like you've been very fortunate with your clientele, with your customers. Yeah.
Yes.
So, what kind of customers do have? Because
Yeah.
I guess you've got like some sake connoisseurs, but
Yes.
on the other side of the spectrum, you've got probably people who never tried sake. I just look at them and say, okay, where are you going? Oh, let's go to this place.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was a very wonderful and pleasant surprise that the majority of our customers are people who are very new to sake. They really are people who just walk by and say, oh, this place looks cool. Let's go in. And then they ask, can we have a red wine? And we say, actually, we don't have red wine. That's a lot of the conversations we have. So, yeah, but we have been fortunate in the sense that a lot of people who come into our doors have an open mind. And that's what's more important for us than knowing about Japan or sake or anything. It's having an open mind, Rarely do people shut us down like, oh, you don't have this exact thing I was looking for. Okay, bye, never mind. We don't really have that too often, which is great. Somehow, maybe the energy that we exude, I don't know what it is, but we tend to have people, again, with an open mind. They may not know about sake, but we usually, take them through a sake flight if they're new to sake. That's a great place for people new to sake to start off with. We have a different sake flight every day, but it's always 3 very different sakes. So it's first and foremost, it's wow, there's a variety of different flavors and aromas. I think that's what's important to discover. And I always tell them, you don't need to love all 3 sakes. I'd actually prefer that you hate number 3, but you love number 1. Then we could start a conversation from there. Okay, you love number 1. Well, then do you like more richer, savory sakes? This is something that, okay, I'm going to recommend another one to you. Okay, you should order this food because this goes well with it. Then the conversation starts to flow. So yeah, that's usually the kind of customers we have. And those are the conversations we have a lot of. But of course, we do have people who seek us out. They've looked up London sake bar because they were specifically looking for sake. Or London Japanese food or something because they were specifically looking for Japanese food. And that's amazing as well, that people who are looking for something authentically Japanese come to us. We also have Japanese, like expats, just Japanese people living in London come to us. And it's wonderful to hear actually Japanese people say, oh, wow, I feel right at home. That's one of the biggest compliments, wonderful. I think. So yeah, so we definitely have a wide spectrum of people who are completely new to sake to experts, who have traveled Japan and have their own sake collection. We have all sorts of people, but I do think we have something for everyone at Moto. And our staff are very talkative people that love having conversations with anyone. So yeah, all is welcome. But in terms of guests thus far, it's been a lot of people very new to sake.
Okay, yeah. I think it's very important for people to make them feel at home when they go to something unfamiliar to them. So what do you do? For example, somebody comes in and stops and looking at the beautiful wall or these bottles. Do you try to engage with this person or you just wait for the person to say something? How does it work?
Yeah, we usually, they usually do have something to say for sure.
Okay, yeah.
But, sometimes it could start off with, have you ever had Japanese sake before? And they would say, never. What is sake? Oh, or like, oh, that's a spirit. Something of that nature. And a natural dialogue ensues. And we don't like overburdening people with information off the bat. I think that could scare people away. I think it's nice to kind of tease them with a bit of information, hook them in. But I think at the beginning, getting them to taste sake is the most important thing. You could chat their ear off, but just get them to have a sip, and usually the sake does the talking. So, I'm very proud of the products we stock. We, gone personally to every single one of these breweries, tasted all of these sakes before importing it here. And we have a wide range of sakes available. And each of them are amazing sakes. So I think instead of attacking them with information almost, kind of like whetting their appetites at the beginning and getting them to taste sake. And not once have we had anyone say, this isn't what I'm looking for, like,
yeah, amazing.
So yeah, I definitely do think that the sake is the talking.
So you don't start with something like, oh yeah, it's Junmai Daiginjo 43
no,
milling ratio, and
exactly, definitely not. So I do include that. So I have a nice sake menu where the name of each sake, of course, and I do include things like rice polishing ratio, the grade, the prefecture in which it's from, but that's not where I start off with sake newbies. Definitely not. Our objective is not to make everyone into a sake expert. It's to create more sake lovers, which they don't need to know that it's 35% rice polishing ratio. They just need to know that they like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or don't like it. It depends. So a lot of the time, my team usually talks more about the tasting notes. I think that's more important. A drink, first and foremost, you care about what it tastes like. So we talk about tasting notes first. And tasting notes very much in terms of like apples, grapes, bananas, yogurt, things that are more accessible rather than, it's like a summer's breeze and this. No, like we don't really do like flowery language. We try to make it as understandable as possible. And also we like to talk about the brewers themselves, like, this is made by someone who has a background in fermenting wine. So his sakes tend to have a very nice, clean and elegant nature to them. They're very aromatic because he has his background with wine, and that kind of excites people more than, again, rice polishing ratio, which they don't even know what that means. But if people ask, then we have actually one of the breweries sent me rice with a different milling. Wow. So 50% versus 35. So we have something tangible to show people.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So we do that, but that's only if people ask. Okay. Or if we feel like it's their 7th visit and it's about time because they seem like they'd be interested. Then, of course, we'd let them in on more of the geeky things, but definitely not on the first visit.
No. Okay. Yeah. I think it's quite good strategy. And so you import sake yourself, and it's again, I guess it's a conscious choice because obviously there are 3 big sake importers in the UK, plus probably 2, 3, 4 a bit smaller players.
Yes.
But there is a choice of sake to buy for bars and restaurants. But you decided to do it yourself. So what was the main reason for that?
The main reason is the fact that nothing at all wrong with or bad or anything about the sake that those importers were already bringing in. Again, like on my days off, I buy sake from there. You know what I mean? But everyone had more or less the same selection. There wasn't too much of a variety. And the whole point that we were trying to convey is just how many different breweries there are in Japan. And also given how so many breweries in Japan are the smaller ones that are kind of struggling. They make great sake, but there's just not enough of a demand. Instead of bringing more of the same stuff in, why not, if we have the means to, of course we have to make the means, we have to do all these different things to be able to import ourselves. But if it's possible, then we should be shedding light on these lesser known but equally amazing breweries that deserves attention,
Yeah.
and so that was our biggest motivation.
Sugedama blog.
So you went to Japan yourself, and you visited breweries, you tasted sake, you chose the sake you wanted to represent at Moto. Sake industry in Japan is very male dominated.
Yes.
Getting better, but especially with Toji, who are like still in their 60s. Did it affect in any way your ability to talk to them, being a woman?
Such an interesting question. And surprisingly, it could have worked in my favor. So basically, the way I approached these breweries was I first emailed them, and then I called them and I said, so I'm going to, if you don't mind, I really want to represent your sake in London. And mind you, at that point, Moto wasn't open. So I couldn't even send them a link to what this bar was going to be like. It was just all in my head.
Yeah.
But basically, I want to open up the sake bar. I want to show basically more variety and mix, infuse some more fresh blood into the sake scene in London. And I do think that your products and your brewery and your ethos is exactly what's going to really elevate our beverage portfolio. If you don't mind, I would love to stop by your brewery and have a chat with you if that's all right. And, for these breweries who, again, are in countryside towns, they barely have foreign tourists, and never haven't, a lot of the breweries we stock from have never exported their products before, and if they have, not in the UK, because that's our ethos is never before imported into the UK. So they definitely don't have any contacts in the UK. And then all of a sudden there's this person out of nowhere asking these weird questions. Like a lot of them were actually very confused. So I show up, I'm this Asian looking girl, but speaking English. I'm translating for my business partner who doesn't speak Japanese. And they're just like so confused, like what in the world, and only after hours of conversation and giving the context did they warm up to me. But I do think the fact that maybe I was this girl instead of an older man could have, maybe I seemed a bit more approachable. I definitely don't think I have a menacing quality about me. So perhaps it helped, with this bizarre scenario in which someone is from London, UK is taking an interest in their products all of a sudden. So yeah, I think it worked in my favor. And it's very true that in Japan, the sake world, women were forbidden from entering breweries for centuries of years. And only recently, and even then, there's 200 or so breweries, and there's only, I think, around 30 women toji. So still the minority, but finally there are influential women in the sake sphere. So I guess it's a start, But within this context, I love that I am a woman, hopefully on her way of, paving the way for more sake breweries to be noticed and kind of this revival of the sake industry. And I do feel very fortunate that I'm in London because London, for some reason, are filled with women who are working in the world of sake.
Exactly.
So, there are sake educators, sake importers, distributors, sake brand ambassadors. I know so many Japanese women in London. So I have a lot of, people to look up to in that regards. So yeah, it's probably only worked in my favor, and I don't feel at all like I'm having to battle anything.
Any prejudices?
So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds cool. Okay. Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it's amazing story you've got about Moto, how you started, how you went through turbulent year 2020.
Yes.
And
Italy.
still going strong and up for opening up again
Yes.
this week, I think. Yeah.
Yes. So Wednesday, December 2nd. So in 2 days' time.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So would you like to give our listeners any sake tips?
Sake tips. I think your listeners probably already know a lot about sake, so I'm not gonna bore your listeners with the things I usually tell a sake novice. But one tip, if you will, or at least what I've told myself, is to never lose that sense of fun when it comes to enjoying sake. We were talking about being bogged down by terminology and all this knowledge, and even if I don't have the barrier of Japanese against me, there was a point in which I was getting bogged down in, okay, so this is a Junmai Daiginjo, so I should be drinking it with this and appreciating it in these temperatures. But, I think the fun came back when I was like, oh, you know what, I'm going to try heating this. Oh, I'm going to try having it with this food instead. Oh, I'm going to read up on why this brewer decided to make this sake. What was his motivation? I email one of the breweries and ask like, oh, like what happened when you made this? This is when love for sake started. It never left, but you know what I mean? It just reignites passion. And I think it's just good maybe for your listeners as well too. I'm sure they love sake, but I think just keeping that love and excitement and newness alive is that's what's going to make sake their continued passion. And it's a long journey, there's always something to explore. So just have fun with it, I think is my tip, if you will.
Yeah, it's a great tip. So would you like to introduce any sake for our listeners at the end of the episode?
Yes. It's actually what I'm going to be opening up with my staff later on today. We're going to have our 1-year birthday celebration party later on.
Oh, cool.
So the sake we'll be opening is going to be, it's called Jokigen, Junmai Daiginjo, Dewasansan 40. It's quite a long name, but if you break it down, basically it is Junmai Daiginjo. Dewasansan is a sake-specific rice local to Yamagata Prefecture, which is where the sake is brewed in. It's made by Sakata Brewery. And the 40 represents that it's brewed to 40% rice polishing ratio. But basically, it's a very clean sake, purity and flavor, really expresses that flavor profile, very characteristic to Dewasansan, this specific sake-specific rice. It has such nice, it's very aromatic and fruity, but it ends with a very dry, very clean finish. So it's not a complex sake, but it's a sake that you want to continue drinking and drinking. So it's very easy drinking sake.
Yeah.
So a night like tonight where our team is just celebrating, we don't need to really think about the sake. We just want to, crack it open and enjoy a really good drink. This is it. And it's actually when people come to Moto and they're new to sake, I actually like suggesting this is their first sake as well. I think it's also a very good entry-level sake. It's very approachable, kind of that white wine kind of character to it. And it's available on our online shop. When you come to Moto, also for takeaway, so very accessible as well.
And what prefecture it's from?
Yamagata.
Oh, Yamagata. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds very casual, nice sort of take it easy sake.
Exactly, but still absolutely beautiful. It's really, really delicious. Definitely recommend. When you come in, you got to try it.
Yeah, I've got ready. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he's used this English expression I've never heard. Probably I heard it, but I said, okay, I know the very nice sake bar in Covent Garden. And he said, yeah, they've got our names on it, or something like that. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like perfect for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely come
there
in
we
at
go.
some point.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. It was a great interview. It's a very great story. I really, really, really enjoyed talking to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's such a pleasure to talk to fellow sake lovers, and it's really cool what you're doing with this podcast. I think we maybe have a very similar motivation in why we're doing what we're doing. You just have a blog and podcast. I have a bar. It's different ways, but I think we're all coming together with similar motivations. So yeah, it's really wonderful to chat with you, Alex.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
What a conversation. You can see now that it was very difficult to cut anything off. And it should be interesting not only for people who want to know more about sake, but anyone who just want to open their own business, because it's about resilience, positive thinking, and passion for what you do. Let me know what you think about the interview. The sake Erika recommended is available at Moto London and from their online shop. I will put the link in the show notes. But don't forget about London Sake, who have an amazing range of sake and also do something similar to sake flights, sake tasting sets. I've told you about a Dasai sake tasting set, but another set which is very interesting is their introductory tasting set, which includes Nanbu Bijin Junmai sake, Dasai 45 and Nanbu Bijin Umeshu, a plum sake. Don't forget to mention Sugidama, all caps, at checkout to get a 10% discount. That's it for today. Sorry for a very long episode, but I hope it was worth your time. The plan is to release 2 final episodes of the first Sugidama podcast season before the end of the year. One is very interesting interview about sake history with Natsuki Kikue, but I haven't decided on the last episode yet. I had a couple of ideas, but they didn't realize this time. So, if you have any suggestions, email me on alex@sugidama.co.uk or connect through social media. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, even LinkedIn. Search for Sugidama blog. Pop into Moto London, have a glass of sake, and talk in person with Erika. She's usually there. Log into their online shop or London Sake and order something nice for the upcoming festivities. Let me know what sake you liked the most this year, and I will read it out on the podcast. If you don't want to miss any new episodes, please subscribe to the podcast. All podcast players and platforms do have this option. If you use Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. It's the best support you can give me. Share the podcast on your social media with your friends, relatives, and anyone else who show interest in sake. Thanks a lot for listening. Kampai.
Suge, 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 Sugidama blog. Suge, 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 Sugidama blog.